Hello, my name is Tom Napo. I'm the Property and Marine Technical Leader at CNA Risk Control. I've been in the insurance industry, risk control space for about 20 years. I'm a certified fire protection specialist, and I'm a professional member of the Society of Fire Protection Engineers.
My name is Matt Monahan. I lead CNA's property, field, and catastrophe claims operation. I've been working in the insurance industry for over 25 years, and more than half that time has been spent in property claims. I have several years of experience leading catastrophe response on a countrywide level.
Hi, my name is Luke Beckman. I serve as a disaster director with the American Red Cross, and I've been coordinating local, state, federal, and international operations for the last 15 years. National Preparedness Month, every September, is a time where individuals, families, communities, businesses, and society at large can really focus in to understand risk, can understand their level of preparedness, what they're doing, what's working well, what's not working well. It's a time to pull out your go bag, to sign up for emergency alerts. It's a time to get to know your neighbors, and a time to have conversations with all the people around you around, hey, if a bad thing happens, what are we going to do? Matt, can you tell us a little bit about wildfires, what they are, how they're growing, and how they're impacting us?
Sure. I think the recent tragedy in Lahaina really reinforces the devastating impact wildfires have on entire communities. Human lives are lost, property is damaged and destroyed, and local economies are also greatly affected. Our thoughts are with all those impacted by the recent fires. I think it's critical for members of the insurance industry to really step up and work together with our customers, our agents and brokers, affected communities, and organizations like the American Red Cross to make sure that we're collectively prepared to respond in the case of a wildfire event. Tom, perhaps you can share a little bit of perspective on resiliency from a business standpoint.
Yeah, it's a great thing to think about right now, certainly the Lahaina fires, but just looking at organizations as a whole over the last couple of years with the pandemic, some of the supply chain disruptions, the shutdowns associated with the pandemic, there's been so much change and so much chaos happening in the world, and it's really resulted in businesses focusing a lot more on how they protect themselves, how they protect their property, how they protect their employees, but also it's allowed us really to up our game and meet them where they are with respect to consulting services, helping them with incident management, crisis management, business continuity. It's really been a great opportunity for us to help share our knowledge and our experience with our clients to help support their overall organizational resilience. So when I think about that, Luke, your role at the Red Cross, talk to me a little bit about the current state of disasters as you see it.
So with wildfires, the way that we think about them and plan and describe them is that we're moving kind of from an acute to a chronic state of wildfires. And we used to talk about wildfires in the sense that there was a wildfire season for a couple months. And we're seeing wildfires that are starting earlier in the year and going later in the year to the point where in a lot of wildfire country, you're seeing fires year round. And we're also seeing that interplay with humans, of course, and we have more people living in beautiful areas, which happen to be where wildfires burn frequently. And we also are seeing more vulnerable populations being affected by wildfires. So people who can't move or move as well, people who have communication difficulties with emergency officials. And as we put that together, when you have dry fuel loads, when you have strong winds, when you have high temperatures, we're seeing wildfires that are stronger, that are impacting more people. We also have to think too about wildfire smoke. So when we think about recent wildfires in Canada and how that smoke impacted tens of millions of people across the United States, a lot of people who don't necessarily live in a place where wildfires burn are starting to pay attention to them. And so we're seeing all of these compounding effects, and we're also learning a lot more about the health risks from wildfire smoke directly. And it's not just unpleasant, it's not just hazy on the skyline, but it's actually affecting people in really profound ways. So all of these things are happening together, and we're rising to the challenge to meet that as fast as we can. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing from a risk control perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, the last year has been a bit of an inflection point, both for risk control, but also really, I think, for the world, and particularly North America. the recent Lahaina fires, and just the impact of the smoke from some of the Canadian wildfires impacting New York City, cities like Chicago, Detroit, all of these major cities. I think it's really opened up a lot of people's eyes to the impact of wildfire and how it's not a California thing. It's not a Nova Scotia or a Quebec thing. It's a thing that can impact all of us. It should impact all of us. From a risk control standpoint, I think the thing we see is really just some of the growth of what we call secondary perils or secondary convective storms. Hail is a huge, tremendous loss driver, has a lot of impact particularly in the United States. And a lot of that is because as we've grown as a country, we're moving. We're moving to places where hail falls, where we didn't previously live before. And when we move to those places, the businesses obviously follow, and that impacts us as an insurer. I think the other thing, particularly with wildfire, is really what you talked about the wildland-urban interface and some of the socioeconomic conditions that we see today in the world with inflation and interest rates, right, making the cost of living more expensive. That pushes people more out into those areas and pushes them more into high-risk places where they are potentially vulnerable to the effects of a wildfire or ignition. And again, when those people move to those areas, the businesses follow, right? So that's what we have to focus on. That's what we are focusing on as an organization, is how to help those businesses understand how to protect their properties and how to protect their people. So that's my perspective from a risk control side, a business side. So tell me a little bit about, Luke, the public. How does the public prepare for disasters? How do you view that from a Red Cross perspective?
When we think about wildfires, they're mainstream news. They're big. They're scary. And when in reality, when we think about why and how we want to prepare for wildfires, the general mantra, just think about yourself, think about your family, is sort of, it's not going to happen to me. The reality is it does happen to people, and it's happening more and more. And at the Red Cross, we're really focused on trying to educate people on the risk, but also that there are a lot of things you can do to prepare for a wildfire. Right? It's not a hopeless or helpless thing. You can be proactive. And so I think the first mantra is, when in doubt, get out. If there is a wildfire close, or if you're feeling off, it always takes longer to evacuate, to leave when a fire's coming, than you think it will. And the more time that you can buy on the front end before a fire is even close in your community, the better off you, your family, your business, your team, your employees, your customers, the better off everybody's going to be. And so when we think about that, how do we buy time? It's about signing up for alerts and notifications. It's about paying attention to the general weather and knowing if are wildfire conditions likely this week or this month. It's about knowing your neighbors, knowing your teammates, knowing who has needs, who has what resources in a community, getting to know your local fire department and your local fire, police, EMS teams. They have lots of open houses. So the more that you know people, the more that they know you. So they understand where you are and what your needs might be. Then when we think about from the family unit or the team perspective, we're thinking about, do you have the right supplies to be able to get out and to be able to take care of yourself? And there's a lot you can do even on the front end, whether it's medications, whether it's just anything to make you more comfortable, protecting valuables so that you're not trying to gather 50 different things before you have to evacuate. And the more smooth that you can make that whole process, making sure you have the right kind of insurance to if something, God forbid, happens to your home, so that you don't have to start from scratch. A lot of those things can happen on the front end well before a wildfire even happens. Once there is a fire, and as it gets closer, paying attention, once you've signed up for those alerts, paying attention to evacuation orders. Again, when in doubt, get out. So the earlier that you can do things, the safer you're going to be, the calmer you're going to be, the more it just feels like you're going somewhere rather than you're fleeing fast. And then paying attention, signing up. The Red Cross Emergency app is a great tool to be able to see where there are shelters, what actual steps you can take, how you can prepare your family depending on different needs that you have. Do you have young kids? Do you have pets? Are there elderly folks in your family that you need to take care of anybody who might need a little bit extra time or a little bit of extra help? So the more that you prepare, the more that you can shorten those time frames, and the calmer everybody's going to be. And then once if you do have to leave, then you're going to a place, everyone's calm, everyone's together, everyone's accounted for. Then when we think about the actual homes, there is a lot you can do, and to your property, there's a lot you can do with respect to defensible space, to harden your home, and really look at local building codes, have those conversations with emergency managers, with your insurance company, and as you think about that 0 to 5 foot no burn zone, and we look at how wildfires burn, it's not just a wall of fire and flame. There are embers that shoot out. In some cases, depending on the wind, they could shoot out miles in front of the fire. And so what we know is that most homes are burning from embers, structures are burning from those embers, tiny little specks of flame, rather than the wall of fire. So even if the fire is far away from you, it can move faster as those embers land on your property. And so we work at the Red Cross, we work to help educate people about not just the wildfire risk, but what they might want to do or think about doing to their home or to their property with our preparedness programs. And the same goes for anyone who has a building. There's a lot you can do to harden and better prepare your home. And again, even as that wildfire moves faster, if you've done all these preparedness steps, making a kit, building a plan, getting informed, knowing where you're going to go, letting people know that you're safe, letting people know where you've gone, then you're much more likely to come back to your house more quickly and for your house to still be standing. So there's a lot you can do at the personal, at the family, at the individual level. But can you tell us a little bit about, from the risk control perspective, how people can prepare for wildfires?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very similar. I think there's an image that was in the media around the time right after the Lahaina wildfires, and it's this picture of really devastation along the coast. But there's this one house, and there's that one house that's standing, almost as if it had been untouched. And that house is standing because of defensible space. And what you talked about is one of the great misconceptions. Most people assume that a wildfire spreads through radiant or convective heat, but most of the time it can, but most of the time those ignitions are from firebrands, are from embers, like you said. So protecting that area around the business, around the home, whatever it may be, is critically important. It's really as simple as removing combustible vegetation, plastic containers, protecting underneath decks, whatever it might be, to make sure that those embers can't ignite anything close to that business or that residence. The other thing that's really important to think about from a wildfire perspective for a business is how else can embers and firebrands get into the building? And one of the other ways typically is vents and openings. So if you've got eaves, you've got various different vents around the exterior, there are ways to protect those with a special type of mesh filtration that allows you to really have more confidence that those embers, those firebrands that are being blown, won't actually get into those spaces, and particularly in those combustible spaces. I think the last thing for a business to think about on an ignition standpoint, and really just from a people and property perspective, is, like you talked about earlier, wildfire smoke is a really significant health hazard. And there are businesses out there that all of us are susceptible to wildfire smoke, but there's some, for example, like a hospital or a nursing facility, some very, very serious concerns there, right? So it's important for businesses to think about, okay, if we're going to remain operating, even if the wildfire is miles away, is our air quality going to be good enough to be able to do that safely? And that's something that, many businesses should really take a look at as far as, how they're bringing in air into the facility, how they're managing their makeup air, how they're managing all of their HVAC systems, because there are ways to reduce the risk, provide filtration, and limit the amount of makeup and fresh air into the building in times like that to minimize the impact of some of that wildfire smoke as well. So from a claims perspective, Matt, how do you look at this?
Yeah, but from a preparedness perspective, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the safety and well-being of our customers. Nothing's more important to us at CNA. With that, I want to reinforce something that Luke mentioned, which is very important, which is not only to have an evacuation plan, but to test that plan throughout the course of the year, so that if and when that wildfire happens, you have some guidance and you have the ability to navigate through that chaotic period of time with some control, with some direction. I think that's very important. Luke mentioned the importance of also accessing resources from the American Red Cross, also from the state and local county. Many of those resources contain alert capabilities that will alert your mobile phone if and when a fire is threatening your community. So I think it's important to pay attention to the local weather, but also to those resources that are available. From a claim preparedness perspective, Luke also mentioned the word educate, and I think that's what comes to mind for me. Is it's important for folks to educate themselves on what their policy provides in the form of coverage for a couple of things. Coverage for direct physical loss or damage, which typically involves the building or the structure of their business. Also, business personal property or contents related items that may be lost or damaged from a fire. It's important to understand the coverages that you have in place or that are available for you to protect those things. Couple of other examples that relate to indirect physical loss or damage involve loss of income. You know, if a business becomes inoperable following a fire, business interruption coverage is important to understand to have as a part of your property coverages. Extra expense is also another important coverage to have and to thoroughly understand. It typically reimburses business owners for any costs incurred to minimize the downtime or disruption to their business and to kind of get that business up and running again. There are other coverages that may come into play. It's important to talk with your agent or broker to understand what they are. Debris removal coverage and civil authority coverage are a couple of additional examples. One other point I wanted to call out is it's important to update your policy throughout the year whenever there's a meaningful change to your property risks and exposures. Also to make sure that the limits on your policy for building coverage align with current values. It's a step to take to make sure that you're not underinsured when it comes to the value of your property. Now I'm going to transition from claim preparedness and talk a little bit about some tips to help you build back better following a wildfire event. Really the key is to report your claim immediately to your insurance carrier. Don't waste time. You know, it's important to notify your insurance company before you know all the details regarding your loss. Certainly it's important to come prepared with information about the damages to your property, including the structure, any business personal property, but don't waste time. Report your claim right away so that your claim professional can get assigned to your loss and really help you on the road to recovery as soon as possible. Second, it's important to keep important business records secure and in an off-site location so that you can retrieve them efficiently after an event. I would encourage everyone to convert any paper records to digital format to make that process a bit more seamless. Some examples of business records include financial statements or reports for a business, your insurance policy documents, claim reporting information is another example, a lease if you don't own the business from which you operate. Also important to have copies of your lease documentation, and those are things that the claim professional will be seeking after you report that claim to your insurance company. And third, it's important to protect your property from additional damage when it's possible to do so. And before disposing of any property, please speak with your claim professional first. It may be important to share photographs of any damaged property before it's removed. And then last, exercise caution and due diligence before securing a contractor to begin repairs, and certainly before signing anything. The CNA property claims teams are highly prepared to help our customers and our distribution partners recover after a wildfire event. We have teams that are aligned throughout the country, and they're poised to get on site very quickly after a fire to help our customers recover, conduct physical inspections of the damaged property, and to help people get started with the claim process. We also leverage sophisticated mapping technology and aerial imagery to identify customers who are located within or just outside the perimeter of a wildfire. What that enables us to do is to proactively reach out to those customers to check on their well-being and also to offer them claim reporting assistance in the event that their property sustained damage. We're committed at CNA to helping our customers build back better. Luke, can you talk to us a little bit about how the American Red Cross helps people recover from a wildfire event?
At the Red Cross, we focus extensively on the response, but also the recovery. A lot of people think that we open shelters and they see us there, and we're there for the response period. But the recovery is often the longer, the tougher, the more daunting phase. And we work with communities for months. Some cases could be years after an event. And when we think about recovery, it's not just about financial resources. The Red Cross does provide financial resources to certain families under certain conditions, but a lot of it is about the process. A lot of it is about understanding, where do I go next, right? The disaster knocks you off your feet. You may not have lost your home, right? It may be that you lost daycare, or the school is closed, or you can't get back to work for some period of time. And so that just complicates the recovery process. And there isn't one yellow brick road, one path that people can follow. And so we have teams of caseworkers and that get with individuals and families and communities to help figure out what is the best plan for them so that they can build back better. And it's also about convening the community. So an individual family is a family unit, might be 3, 4, or 5 people, but it exists within a neighborhood, exists within a community. And there could be dozens of agencies, for-profits, nonprofits, government organizations, community groups, homeowners associations, that all need to figure out how to work together to distribute funds, to support those who were hit most aggressively from the wildfire. And we really work to create a safe and an open space for those communities to come together. And for people who may not have had much of a voice, they may have been marginalized before the disaster, to help support those people, those groups, and so that everybody has a seat at the table. Because we really do believe in that equity after a disaster. Because there are a lot of people who can be forgotten. We really work and focus to make sure that nobody gets forgotten. And when we couple those convening powers with, and we may not lead, we might just be a supporting group, one of many. When we couple those with the financial assistance, that can be really powerful for an individual or for a community. And we really do try to focus on, what are those things that people need most, right? What's going to help them, not just for a week, not just for a month, but for years down the road, so that they are more resilient after the wildfire. Tom, is there anything else you'd like to share from a risk control perspective?
Yeah, when you think about building back better, most of that process is managed by our claims team, and certainly from a public perspective by the Red Cross. But from a risk control perspective, when you look at significant events, devastating events where buildings are impacted, destroyed, or partially destroyed, when you think about building back better, there are some things that you can inherently build into that structure that can harden it and protect it from wildfire in the future. Some of those things are just very difficult to do in an existing structure. So that could be building materials, that can be exterior fire sprinkler systems, easier to protect and access some of the vents and areas that can be tricky to get to in certain cases. So that's where something our risk control team can certainly contribute and provide guidance to our customers about. When they rebuild, how can we help prevent the risk, but also how can we help to harden that structure to make it less likely that a wildfire will impact it going forward. So a couple of things in closing. I just want to mention certainly our 2023 Strategic Business Resilience Report. It's a report that really focuses on resilience for organizations, for people, how to build that resilience, how to evaluate where you are in that process with respect to incident, crisis, business continuity. Certainly that's a really valuable tool when you're thinking about wildfire resilience. Another tool I want to point people to on CNA.com is our Wildfire Resilience Client Guide, which provides some of the practical tips and guidance that I talked about earlier as far as defensible space and protecting and hardening buildings, but also preparing your employees and thinking about incident response. So Matt, any closing thoughts from a claims perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, to close from a claims perspective, would encourage you to visit CNA.com and our claims center for important reference materials that will help you in the event of a wildfire or other catastrophe. Also want to remind everyone to please establish and test an evacuation plan throughout the course of the year. And then finally, we certainly hope that you're not affected by a wildfire or other disaster. If you are, CNA is here to help you build back better. And with that, Luke, any closing comments from you?
For the Red Cross, the first thing I would say is go ahead and download the emergency app. You can go in the Apple Play Store, the Google Store, anywhere you get your apps. It takes 30 seconds. Download it and sign up not just your home, but your work location or work locations, and where you have family members who may live in different areas. Because when you do that, you'll actually get alerts for each of those different locations in case something comes up. Then within the app, we also have a set of checklists which focus on building a plan, making a kit, and getting informed. And when you put those three things together, that really can buy you and your family time. And I would also say that slogan, say it over and over again, when in doubt, get out. The more time that you can buy for your family, for your community, for the people who rely on you, the safer you will all be. Thank you for being with us, and everyone stay safe.